Sun slowly dipped behind the skyline of Manila, casting an amber glow over the bustling streets. Vendors shouted the day's last sales, jeepneys honked impatiently, and the air buzzed with life. Amid the noise, a gentle melody began to rise, soft, pure, and full of emotion. Standing on a cracked pavement near a small church were Maria, a 17-year-old girl with a warm yet tired smile, and her younger brother Luis, only 14, holding a beat-up microphone connected to a small speaker. They began to sing the prayer. Their voices intertwined like silk, Maria's soft and angelic, Luis's deep and soulful. Despite the chaos around them, people began to stop. A street vendor paused mid-sale, a jeepney driver turned off his engine just to listen. Even the usual chatter of the street faded into silence. Maria closed her eyes as she sang the English lines, her voice trembling with sincerity. "I pray you'll be our eyes, and watch us where we go." Then Luis joined in, his Italian verse soaring beautifully through the air, his tone surprisingly mature for his age. Together, their voices rose like a single prayer offered to the heavens. Coins began to clink in their open guitar case, but no one was thinking about money, only the music. A tourist nearby, tears in her eyes, pulled out her phone and began recording. "This is incredible," she whispered. As the final note hung in the air, the siblings smiled shyly at each other, unaware that this simple street performance would soon change their lives forever. The crowd erupted in applause, and the tourist's video, posted that very night, would travel across oceans, touching millions of hearts around the world. Few weeks had passed since Maria and Luis's street performance went viral. Their humble neighborhood in Manila buzzed with pride, neighbors replayed the video on their phones, and churchgoers whispered, "That's our local singers." But inside their small wooden home, life was still simple. The siblings were doing chores when Maria's old phone buzzed with a new email notification. She glanced at the screen and froze. Her hands began to tremble as she whispered, "Luis, look at this." Her brother rushed over, eyes wide. The message read, "Congratulations, you've been invited to audition for America's Got Talent 2025. Please confirm your attendance." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then, their mother, still in her apron, dropped the dish she was washing and began to cry. "My children, AGT," she exclaimed, covering her mouth in disbelief. Luis hugged her tightly while Maria wiped her own tears. They didn't have much. Their old guitar was cracked, their clothes worn, and their savings almost gone. But they had faith. Their father, who worked far away, called that night with trembling pride in his voice, "Go, Anak, let the world hear your prayer." To afford the trip, they sold their guitar and borrowed money from a kind neighbor. The community came together, donating what little they could, a few pesos, a suitcase, even snacks for the journey. At the airport, Maria held her brother's hand tightly. Both of them were barefoot inside their hearts, nervous, hopeful, and overwhelmed. Before boarding, they bowed their heads and whispered, "Lord, guide our voices, and let this song be for you." As the plane lifted into the sky, they looked out the window, their dream finally taking flight. The moment Maria and Luis stepped onto the America's Got Talent 2025 stage, their hearts pounded like drums. The stage lights were blinding, and the vast audience felt like a sea of faces. Dressed in their best, simple white clothes gifted by church friends, they held hands, trembling slightly. Simon Cowell leaned forward, curious, while Sophia, Heidi, and Howie smiled warmly. Simon was the first to speak. "Hello, what are your names, and where are you from?" Maria took a deep breath. "I'm Maria, and this is my brother, Luis. We're from the Philippines." The audience applauded loudly. Simon nodded and asked, "What will you be singing for us tonight?" Luis replied softly, "We'll sing the prayer." When the music began, the room fell silent. Maria started the English verse, her voice pure and trembling with emotion. "I pray you'll be our eyes, and watch us where we go." Her tone carried a sincerity that silenced even the whispers in the back rows. Then Luis entered with the Italian verse, his voice rich and soaring. The contrast, one soft and angelic, the other deep and powerful, created a harmony so divine that even Simon's expression softened. As the song built to its climax, Maria's voice quivered with tears, while Luis closed his eyes, singing from his soul. The final line, "Guide us with your grace, give us faith so we'll be safe," echoed across the hall like a whispered prayer. When the music stopped, there was a long pause. Then, as if on cue, the audience erupted in a standing ovation. Simon leaned back, blinking away tears. The siblings looked at each other. They had just turned their prayer into a miracle. The final notes of the prayer lingered in the air, and for a few seconds, no one moved. The theater was wrapped in a silence so deep it felt sacred. Then suddenly, applause thundered through the hall. People rose to their feet, cheering, crying, clapping above their heads. Maria and Luis stood frozen in the center of the stage, overwhelmed. Maria covered her mouth in disbelief, while Luis blinked away tears, gripping his sister's hand tightly. Heidi was the first to speak, her voice trembling. That was heavenly. You two have voices that touch the soul. Sophia nodded, adding, I've never seen anything so pure, so honest. You made us feel something divine. Howie leaned forward. Music like that doesn't come from fame, it comes from faith. You just gave the world a gift. Then, all eyes turned to Simon Cowell. He sat quietly for a moment, head bowed, clearly fighting his emotions. Finally, he looked up, eyes glistening. I've been on this show a long time, he said softly, but what I just heard, it wasn't just a performance. It was a prayer that touched everyone here. Maria and Luis smiled shyly, tears streaming down their faces. Simon stood up slowly, glanced at his fellow judges, and said, You know what I think this moment deserves. He reached forward, and slammed the golden buzzer. Golden confetti exploded from above, swirling around the siblings like a shower of blessings. The crowd roared, chanting, Philippines. Philippines. Maria fell to her knees, sobbing with joy, while Luis lifted his hands to the sky. Backstage, their mother cried uncontrollably as she watched her children bathed in gold. Their faith, their song, and their prayer had just changed their lives forever. The next morning, the internet exploded. Clips of Maria and Luis's golden buzzer performance flooded every social media platform. YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok were filled with comments like, I don't even know them, but I'm crying. These Filipino kids brought heaven down. Within 24 hours, their performance had reached 50 million views, and counting. In their small home back in Manila, their mother sat on a wooden chair, clutching a rosary, tears streaming down her face as she watched the replay on a small television. Neighbors crowded outside their window, cheering every time Simon pressed the golden buzzer. The community that once watched them sing on the streets now celebrated them as national heroes. News outlets around the world called it the prayer that touched the world. Churches played their video during Sunday services, teachers showed it in classrooms, and people across different faiths shared it as a message of hope and unity. Maria and Luis, now invited to interviews and talk shows, stayed humble. When asked what their secret was, Maria simply smiled and said, We just wanted to sing for God and for everyone who's ever felt small but dreamed big. Luis added softly, It wasn't just a song, it was our prayer. One evening, standing on a balcony overlooking Los Angeles, the siblings looked at the city lights below. Kuya, Maria whispered, Do you think we really touched the world? Luis smiled, pointing to the stars. Maybe not the whole world, but we touched hearts, and that's enough. Their voices had crossed oceans and borders, proving that even from the humblest beginnings, a sincere prayer could change the world.